Hello and welcome to the Business of Data podcast. My name is Catherine King and I'll be your host. Welcome to season 3. It's absolutely lovely to have you joining us. In this series, we will be talking to executives and thought leaders from a range of industries, departments and functions, all about their passions, experiences and challenges within data and analytics. Let's go ahead and dive straight into today's episode. Hello everyone and welcome to the Business of Data podcast. Today we are talking all about geodata, customer data and the future of flood insurance. Now to do just that we have brought in the wonderful Jim Albert, who is both chairman and co-founder of Neptune Flood. Now it was about 2 years ago that I first met Jim at one of our geo insurance conferences, about 2 years ago now in New York, and since then we have been keeping up on LinkedIn, and I thought what better time than to bring him back on and chat to me on the podcast. Now if you haven't met Jim before, just a few intro facts for you. Before co-founding Neptune Flood Insurance, Jim held a number of senior roles within tech recruitment consultancies and financial corporations as well. Now, Neptune Flood Insurance aims to use advanced analytics and intuitive, simple quoting process to transform the way flood insurance is purchased in the US, which is super exciting. I'm really looking forward to asking Jim a bit more about that. And on a personal note, if you can't find Jim at his work desk, you'll most likely find him out on his paddleboard or spending time with his family. Jim, it's lovely to have you joining us today.
Catherine, thank you so much for having me here. And the timing actually is great because hurricane season officially ended just 10 days ago here.
Okay.
So, and we're right in the center of it in St. Petersburg, Florida. So we're breathing a sigh of relief that we're finally beyond the 2020 season.
Absolutely. Now, I always start with a nosy question. If we're now in season 3, so if you're a regular listener and watcher, then you know how we do it here. So I want to pick your brains on just that. I mean, you do sound a little obsessed with water. I'm not going to lie, Jim, with the day job being to do with flood and then out on the paddleboard as well. But given the last year we've had with 2020, were you able to get out as much on the paddleboard as you were previous?
Well, first thing, with bars and restaurants being pretty much off limits, what else are we going to do? Seriously though, St. Petersburg, Florida is a pretty amazing place to live. And if I look down the street from my work from home location here, I see the bay, and then we've got bayous and canals and waterways all over the place. So yes, I've been out a lot. In fact, this past weekend, we were out on our boards and a whole pod of manatees rolled by us right up underneath the board. Now, these animals are 11 feet long. So this is a little stunning thing to watch one go underneath your board. But we had dolphins and sharks and rays and schools of fish and all kinds of exotic birds. And it's really a great way to get away from the insurance industry in general and COVID and everything else.
I'm not going to start this episode by saying the insurance industry is dull, but you have just compared it with sharks quite literally swimming around you, which sounds extremely exciting and a bit petrifying.
Give me the sharks any day. Yeah.
Oh my goodness me. Awesome. Well, it's great to have you on the podcast. I always like to start out learning a little bit more about the thought leaders behind the roles that we have here. But now, set the scene for me, Jim, for the audience members who perhaps haven't heard of Neptune Flood. Bear in mind that we do have a global audience, so they may not have. Could you talk us through a bit about the journey that you've been on since late 2016?
Sure. Yeah. The U.S. flood insurance market, and that's where we focus. We're a 100% U.S. flood insurer right now. And the flood insurance market in the US is dominated by a government provider, the National Flood Insurance Program. So unlike the UK that has Flood Re, that's kind of a shared pooled resource, or unlike other countries, the US has this one primary provider that has over 90% market share. And there are lots of good reasons for that. And the National Flood Insurance Program had done an exceptional job over the years. But as with most government programs, technology has started to outstrip what has happened within the flood space. And so what we tried to do, what I tried to create in Neptune when I founded it in 2016, was create an Amazon-like buying experience in flood insurance. Why not? I mean, you can get one-click buying for virtually everything else you do in life. Well, why should you have to go through 54 questions and a 30-day wait and all those things of a kind of a 1983 process? So so we tried to make it to buy flood insurance in the US through the use of data analytics and a really simple online quoting platform. And we did it. So in 2016, started the company, took about a year and a half to build out the tech, to get backing from Lloyd's and various reinsurers. And then we started to accelerate. It was a typical startup experience. We went through the bootstrapping and the moments of brilliance interrupted by moments of sheer terror and crisis. But fortunately, I was surrounded by some really amazing people. And so we grew, and now here it is, December 2020, and we've got over 50,000 policies as of last week, and it's been a real tremendous growth story. One other thing different about Neptune as an insurtech, you hear stories, you read the stories of insurtechs, bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars of capital, and with a question of, is this thing ever going to be profitable? Well, we've built a profitable company. We went profitable a year and a half ago. And the idea is to be sustainable for our employees, for our customers, for the agents, for our business partners, to be a going concern for a long time. So that's what we tried to create.
Absolutely. What a journey. And I'm looking forward to exploring that a little bit more today. Now, for frequent listeners of the Bod Pod, you'll know that I speak to such a range of companies and industries. And it's fair to say that most of the insurers that I talk to, in fact, the previous episode to this one, Alan Crane from USAA, he was suffering with a company that, well, I say suffering sounds harsh, but 100-year-old legacy that comes along with legacy systems. Now, you are completely digital. So what sort of challenges do you experience as a totally digital insurer compared to those who are perhaps in the more traditional sense of insurance?
Yeah. So I've worked for traditional insurers and worked for giant companies, and that legacy stack is a real hindrance to speed and being nimble in the market. So starting up a company allowed me to move really, really fast. That said, the one big inhibitor within the large companies that I've seen, and they've told me this as well, is it's actually not the tech stack, and it's not funding or whatever. It's actually the culture. And getting through the culture and being able to move fast through a series of reviews and bureaucracy and hierarchy that stop you from moving fast. But for Neptune, you're right. We're 100% digital. We're 23 or 24 people, I think, right now. So it's a small company, and we're able to do a lot with a few. But one of the challenges was actually skepticism, and in fact, initially from Lloyd's in 2016, 2017, when I was over in London and I was visiting with various Lloyd's syndicates, there was a lot of skepticism about this thing of digital insurance, and could a digital model actually replace the traditional back room full of underwriters? And when I explained that we actually no, we have no exceptions. We don't have any underwriters. In fact, the underwriter is the computer. But so that was one of the first ones, and we've proved in the model at this point. I think one of the other challenges has been, it's so easy, and it really is. People are amazed when they first get onto our platform and say, "Wait, are we done already? You mean we're at bind already?" That we've actually we got a number of false binds. We'd have agents go onto the system and they'd accidentally hit bind because they couldn't believe they were done already. So we've had to add a pop-up window when they get to the bind. We have a pop-up that says, "Yes, we really mean bind," so that we stop getting these false positives.
I mean, that's a pretty good testament for how simple and quick it is, for certain. And I just kind of go back to your first challenge there of skepticism. I can imagine you walking into one of those Lloyd's office and they literally being just flabbergasted at this concept. I mean, given where we are and given the context of what 2020's done for digital transformation, I feel like that concept is probably not as scary as it was. But back in 2016, I can imagine, although that's only a couple of years ago, really, in the grand scheme of things, I can imagine that was a very, very different cultural experience. So congratulations on being so early in the adoption of it. But
you're right though, Catherine. It is different now. And in fact, in where you and I first met in the conference that you were hosting at that time, there was a debate about by making it very easy to buy insurance, are you actually compromising on quality? And I think time has proven the answer to this question, but there was a big debate at the time. The answer is no. You're actually enhancing quality by automating so many of those data pulls. You're taking the human judgment out of it, and no one knows what the square footage of their house is, for example. So when you get asked that, you immediately introduce error into the underwriting process.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, when we spoke previously, I remember you telling me around 90% of high risk properties are currently uninsured for flood, which is just a crazy high figure to me. Why do you think that is, and what do you think should be done about it?
It is. It's unlike any other line of insurance, at least of the major lines. So if you think about auto insurance or homeowners insurance in the UK or the US, it's the same thing. You have to have it. It's
Yeah.
not optional. So a company coming into the space as, let's say, an insurtech startup, the only way they can grow in homeowners and auto is they have to go grab somebody else's market share and persuade people to not buy that policy from that other insurer and buy your policy. Well, in flood, it's very different. So you look at storms like Hurricane Harvey in 2017 or recent hurricanes, every single one, the Midwest floods, it's not just hurricanes, it's rain and river flooding as well. The majority of the people often that have losses have no insurance. Well, that's really a big problem. And often it takes years to recover from that. Sometimes they don't ever recover from that.
Yeah.
So in the US, Verisk in 2019 did a study and identified that there are 62 million homes at moderate to extreme risk of flooding. Well, given there are about 120 million homes in the US, more than half then are at moderate to extreme risk of flooding. There are only 5.5 million policies. So you can run the numbers, and more than 90% of the people, as you said in the question, more than 90% of the people or homeowners that are at moderate to extreme risk of flooding have no insurance coverage at all. Yes. So that's the coverage gap, and it's really a big problem.
And I think when for anyone who's experienced floods, I mean, I grew up on the Somerset Levels here in the UK, which is one of the areas in the UK that gets really badly flooded. Most years, probably every 3 years, you get something really bad. And, you know, in villages very close to where I grew up, you know, you were dealing with 6 foot of water in your home, and extremely traumatic. But flood is, at least in my experience and opinion, when you talk about it, there's almost some misunderstanding as to how traumatic and difficult it can be until you're in that moment. And I wonder whether that impacts people's perceptions of insurance as well, because, you know, you say hurricane or something like that and it sounds much bigger, but actually these floods are no small matter either.
Yeah, we did a survey the middle of this year, around July of this year, and we surveyed a few thousand people around the US in all flood zones about their flood risk and about their view of flood insurance.
Yeah.
And you probably wouldn't be surprised, but the major findings were most people underestimate their risk of flooding.
There you go.
They think it's somebody else's problem. They underestimate how much loss would occur if they actually had a flood. 1 inch of water, for example, can mean $25,000 of damage to your home. 1 inch. Absolutely. And they overestimate the cost of flood insurance because they hear the horror stories that flood insurance, they hear the $10,000 flood policy stories and think, oh no, I couldn't possibly afford that. Well, the average policy is on the order of $800 or $900, and you can get policies for $350,000 of coverage for $400. Yes. So to save $50,000 of potential loss for $400 is really a pretty good value equation.
Absolutely. Now, of course, this is the Business of Data podcast, so let's talk about a bit about the data that fuels Neptune Flood. How do you ensure that you have access to the most accurate data available? As you said there right at the start, you're removing the humans from many elements, so you're going to be really relying on those data and processes. So how do you make sure you have the most accurate data available, and what data types do you use to assess someone's flood risk?
Yeah. So we pull in about 100 different data elements. And when you enter an address, let's say you went on the Neptune system and you entered an address, you would get, in 1 second, we pull in 100 different attributes, and all in that 1 second. I'd love to show you the demo of it because we've created a little missile command like demo of it. But actually, any of your listeners can go to neptuneflood.com, and under About Us, there is an Experience Triton, and you can actually see our little missile command demo, which is real data, and it's pretty cool to see. But we pull in about 100 different data elements in that 1 second when you enter the address, and we do the full evaluation right then and there.
Yeah.
So we assess the risk, we validate the address and the location, we assess the risk, we price the risk, we calculate the aggregation, and then we also assign it to a reinsurer bucket of capacity. So all that happens in that instant. But you've asked a really good question about how do you ensure that you have the data, and there are a number of, in fact, I kind of call them the 4 A's, but you have to make sure the data is available. So for example, often the data comes in about the structure, but it doesn't tell me whether or not it has a basement. So we have to have multiple sources to ensure that we know whether it has a basement or not. So you have to have data available. It's got to be accessible. If it's in a PDF or a spreadsheet, that's not really helpful. I need to be able to get it in 1 second because we're evaluating it right now. And then it needs to be accurate. So if it's a geocode, if the geocode of the house is a half a mile down the road from where the actual house is, that's a problem. And we're underwriting the wrong location if we do that. That can't happen. So it's got to be accurate. And then what do you do with it? And that's the magic is in the analytics that we provide and do after we pull in all the data. So we do all those 4 A's instantly, maybe more than you wanted to know here, but that's all the stuff in that 1 second.
Absolutely. No, we have such a range of listeners here, so I'm sure the more techie, we're absolutely loving that. But no, it's great to hear all the different areas that you do consider when it comes to data. Now, as I said, I chat to lots of insurers regularly, and I think it's fair to say that pre-filling policy application answers is a bit of an insurance industry trend. Lots and lots more are doing it now. But something quite unique to you guys is you can get a quote on Neptune Insurance by answering as few as 2 questions, I believe. So how do you collect the rest of the data you need to understand accurately someone's flood risk? Because, I mean, they're not giving too much away with those 2 questions. So that means you've got to go and find it elsewhere.
Well, so it goes to those 4 A's that we just talked about, and especially having multiple sources. So I'll go back to the geocode example, that I have to have an accurate geocode. If I don't, then I have to have another source to get an accurate geocode. If that source doesn't have an accurate geocode, then I have to go to another source. And we literally step it down. In some cases, we have 5 or 6 different sources for that data, in the possibility that the first one didn't come through with the data. So that's the access bit and the availability of the data, and then we have to assess the accuracy of it as well. The other thing that we made part of our business model is we're not under the assumption that our data will be the only source of the solution. We actually rely on a network of people that provide us with data and provide us with information and provide us occasionally with analytics. So I go to InsurTech Connect every single year. The events that you run are exceptionally good, by the way, Catherine. The Caribbean events are great. And I go to those events to mostly meet people who are doing interesting things and innovating within the use of, production of, or the analysis of data. And so all the time we're adding new suppliers. And people can reach me at jim@neptuneflood.com if you think you'd fit into Neptune's ecosystem and can provide us with a unique line on data or analytics. I'd love to talk to you.
Super. I'm loving how much you're plugging away here. I love it when a guest uses the podcast to really get their word out there. I think that's great. Now, at the top of the conversation, you've said that the way you described it and the way you think of Neptune Flood is operating as basically the Amazon for flood insurance. Now, do you think this is an approach that more insurers should be moving towards, this fast-paced, digitalized way of operating?
So I love this question. I think they are, for one thing. If you look at what's happened in the pandemic, there's been this huge uptick in grasping digital anything and automation, so that no one wants an inspector to come to their home right now, right? That is not something people are really looking forward to. So if you can find a way to incorporate automation into your model, then that's definitely a good thing and in line with the times. But I'd like to pose a scenario to you. So let's say that you go on to Amazon. Let's use the Amazon example, and you're shopping for clothes or furniture or technology or whatever. And at the end of the process, you click buy, and a message pops up and says, "Thank you for your interest in Amazon. One of our representatives will call you within 7 days to tell you if you qualify to buy our products and how much they will cost. Have a nice day." So how much would Amazon sell if that was their process?
Yeah.
And I think the answer is not much. But now, even though I put it out there as kind of a joke, that is actually the best case in most insurance companies'
Yeah.
model right now. We'll call you back. We'll let you know if you qualify. We'll tell you what your rate is, and then you can decide if you want it or not.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. And insurance isn't the funnest thing to be doing, if I'm honest. So, let's
It
be
could
real.
be paddleboarding, So
Yeah, exactly. Nobody sits down and goes, oh, yeah, I'm going to sort out my insurance today, unless you do, in which case, fair enough. But that elongated process as well, it's not a fun thing to be doing, let alone when you get a random call at work because they finally called you back after 7 days and you're thinking, what is this? I don't have anything in front of me to make that decision. So like you say, it links into that customer experience as well, which again, frequent listeners of the Bod Pod know that I've got a big idea that customer experience and data analytics are going to come even closer in the next few years, because I think they're just going to be linked more now than ever. And as you say, just using that amount of data is just helping and improving that customer experience.
Yeah. And Amazon is a great example here. And how many times, I know I'll talk to my own personal experience. So many times I'll just buy it on Amazon because it's so easy. I don't even bother to shop somewhere else.
Yeah.
So think about that in terms of insurance, where people, when they finally get their heads around having to buy insurance, they've got to sign on to a days or weeks long slog to finally get the information that they need. Or you could go to one site that has seemingly all the information you need with a really good price and great coverage options. And you know what? I'll just do this. And that's what we see happening.
As you said with your survey, most people don't really want to buy flood insurance, so you don't want to make it hard for them when they finally decide that they actually really do need it. So,
yes.
Very much part of it. Now, the time is moving fast, so I want to get in a couple more questions before we have to part ways today. Now, I know when we were catching up before now that you have your eyes set on the commercial space as well for a possibility for greater flood insurance coverage. What plans have you got there?
So when I first started Neptune, Catherine, in 2016, and we launched late 2017, I said within 6 months we'll be in the commercial space. And constantly, often I was asked, well, when are you going to the commercial? And I always said 6 months from now, whenever that question got asked. And I really believed it would have been 6 months, but we had to get the residential right. We had to get we built the whole platform. It's all custom, it's all ours. And we needed to make sure that was working right before we went into commercial. So finally, in June 2020, pretty much 4 years after the founding, we got into Main Street commercial. So just 6 months ago. Yeah. And then in September, we got into habitational and residential condo flood insurance. And that's in 48 states and Washington, D.C. So that's across the country now. Now, what I expect to happen, and I do think it is a crying need. There's a significant need for flood insurance. It's the same process. Enter an address. You'll actually see your quote within 10 seconds. It's crazy fast, and then you can bind in 2 minutes and do all that.
Yeah.
But what I expect to start happening is, first, that'll expand a lot, but we'll also start to expand our coverages. Right now we go up to 2 million in coverage. We'd look to go to larger structures, larger habitational, larger hotels, larger commercial structures, and really start to expand the complexity of the offering. But right now it's just super easy, and we're excited to watch it grow.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a space to watch out for. So wrapping up here then, Jim, looking back over our conversation today, what would you say are your 3 main predictions about the future of insurance based on the things you've talked about?
Well, it's a really good question. Predictions are notoriously wrong, but I think there'll be more personalization. So you look at the automated underwriting, that it's not just Neptune, obviously. There are lots of insurtechs. There are lots of big insurers that are automating many, many different aspects of their model. So insurance largely is becoming more and more automated over time. And then artificial intelligence creates more options for customers. So just like we only evaluate that house over there, not the one next to it, not the whole street is not evaluated in the same way. It's that house. So there's an opportunity with AI and automated underwriting to extreme personalization of offers.
Yeah.
And you see that, and that'll create new product categories. For example, experiential insurance or time-bound insurance, where most of the time your car is in your driveway and not doing anything else. How about if your auto insurance was just applicable to when your car is moving?
Absolutely.
Something like
Absolutely.
that.
I mean, it's so interesting that you should bring this up, because it is something we've spoken about before on two different podcasts. One with Flock, which I'm sure you know is the drone insurer here based in the UK. And they were very much talking about the future in what data can enable with that type of technology. But then also we were chatting to Ricardo from Vauxhall in the automotive industry, and saying that that's the trend in purchasing cars as well, is that they don't want to purchase a car that's going to sit on the side of the road for 4 days of the week. They only want to purchase the use of that car for how they want it. So it makes sense that the insurance industry is seeing that sort of similar trend as well.
That's a big trend. That's a big change. Two others real quick. I think regulators are going to have a difficult time balancing GDPR and California CCPA, privacy restrictions. Is that at our core as insurers, we're actuaries, we're underwriters, we're statisticians, and the use of data in the appropriate way is really important to creating the best offering and an expansion of opportunities for policyholders. But the data restrictions assume nefarious intent and rightfully try and block inappropriate use of the data. Well, somewhere there has to be a balance of those things. I don't have the answer. I just know that there's going to be a lot of evolution of that. Right now, the trend is actually on limiting the use of data rather than allowing it for the appropriate reasons. And we could talk more and more about what some of those reasons might be next podcast. And then the last thing is, I just want to say climate change is real. And we see it in the flood business, the water levels, the intensity of storms, the amount of rain, the characteristics of storms. So flood risk is increasing and awareness is increasing. And I think this will lead to higher consumer adoption of flood insurance. And there possibly we'll see an increased mandate on people buying flood insurance to help solve that coverage gap that we talked about earlier in the podcast.
Absolutely. I think it's so interesting that what we've chatted about in this episode is really from the micro of how you guys work within Neptune, but then also the macro influences around people's acceptance and awareness of flood, but then also, again, even wider than that, the implications of climate change and how that's going to be sadly increasing flood for many people and their areas, and how that's naturally going to impact you guys.
Yep.
Well, that's all the time we have today, Jim. So thank you so much for joining me. It's always great to catch up.
Catherine, great to talk with you. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your very good podcast. So thank you.
Thanks. See you soon.
Okay, bye.
There we go. So from paddleboarding through to flood insurance, Jim certainly is a very passionate speaker. What a brilliant episode. Now, for me, what's really interesting is this episode spoke about it quite a lot, and it's a theme that we are seeing increase over all the business of data formats, is this link between the customer department and the data analytics department. They are blending closer and closer, whether you're thinking of experience or success or the customer journey. Data analytics seems to be having an increased role, as it should. We're all very passionate about data-driven decisions, and it would seem that the best customer experience is absolutely intrinsically linked with a fantastically supported data and analytics department. I mean, just in this episode, Jim really focused and zeroed in on how much data the customer doesn't have to provide anymore, because you can get it elsewhere, and chances are it's going to be a bit more accurate as well. Food for thought, and certainly a trend that I'm excited to see explored more in 2021. As always, make sure you are subscribed to the Business of Data platform, where you will be able to find lots more content and formats to tickle your fancies over data analytics. And don't forget to be following us on socials as well, so you're able to interact with fellow thought leaders in this space. For now, stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you next time.